The scent of lemon polish clung to my skin like a desperate lover. My back ached as I scrubbed the mahogany dining table that stretched like a dark sea across the room. Outside, rain tapped against floor-to-ceiling windows, a gentle percussion accompanying the quiet hum of the penthouse. 6 months I'd worked in this glass and steel fortress in the sky, and still, I felt like an intruder. Sophia, the West Wing still needs attention. Mrs. Winters, the head housekeeper, appeared in the doorway. Her steel-gray hair pulled so tightly it seemed to stretch her wrinkles smooth. Mr. Castellano has guests arriving tomorrow evening. I nodded, keeping my eyes down. Yes, ma'am. I'll finish here first. 13 floors above the city, I moved like a ghost through rooms I'd never be able to afford to stand in if I wasn't cleaning them. The irony wasn't lost on me. I touched everything that belonged to Dominic Castellano, yet he'd never once noticed me, which was exactly how I needed it to stay. As Mrs. Winters's footsteps faded, I pressed a hand to my abdomen, a gesture that had become unconscious over the past few months. Beneath my loose uniform, a secret grew. 5 months along now, my daughter. His daughter. A truth that would destroy everything if discovered. I moved to the kitchen, my reflection distorted in the polished surfaces of professional-grade appliances that cost more than my entire childhood home. Dark circles shadowed my eyes, my blonde hair pulled back severely into a practical bun. I'd become expert at invisibility. The irony of life's cruel twists wasn't lost on me. 8 months ago, before I knew who he really was, before I understood the empire of fear he'd built, I'd spent one night with him. Just one. A different name, a different place. He'd been Dominic Santos then, a businessman I'd met while serving drinks at a charity gala. Not Dominic Castellano, the man whose name was whispered in fear across the city. I pulled my grandmother's silver locket from beneath my uniform, the cool metal a comfort against my palm. Her voice seemed to whisper from it, "Strength doesn't mean you never fall, Sophia. It means you always get back up." I'd been getting back up my entire life, but never had the stakes been so high. The baby kicked, a flutter like butterfly wings, my miracle and my burden. "Ms. Winters says you're behind schedule." The voice froze me in place, deep, quiet, with that slight Italian accent that softened certain consonants. I'd only heard it in passing, through doorways or around corners, never directed at me. I turned slowly, my heart thundering against my ribs. Dominic Castellano stood in the doorway. One shoulder leaned against the frame. In his tailored charcoal suit, he looked like he'd stepped from the pages of a luxury magazine, but the hardness in his eyes told a different story. His dark hair was swept back, revealing the strong lines of his face, handsome in the way that beautiful predators are handsome. He wasn't alone. A man in a black suit, one of his ever-present security detail, hovered just beyond the doorway. "Mr. Castellano." I lowered my gaze, gripping the edge of the counter behind me. "I apologize. I'll work faster." He didn't respond immediately. The silence stretched until I risked glancing up. His eyes, dark as espresso, studied me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. Did he recognize me? No. Impossible. The lighting had been dim that night, and I looked different now. Thinner, paler, my hair a different style. "You're new." It wasn't a question. 6 months, sir." His gaze swept over me, and I fought the urge to cross my arms protectively over my stomach. Instead, I forced myself to stand straight, hands at my sides, eyes properly lowered as Mrs. Winters had instructed all staff to do in his presence. "What's your name?" he asked. "Sophia, sir. Sophia Reyes." A small crease appeared between his brows. "You look familiar." My throat constricted. "I don't think so, sir. I've mostly worked days when you're not home." He made a non-committal sound, then checked his watch. "Platinum. Worth more than a year of my salary. Carry on." Relief washed through me as he turned to leave, but then he paused, looking back over his shoulder. "The West Wing. There's no rush. I've canceled tomorrow's meeting." Then he was gone, his security shadow following, leaving only the lingering scent of expensive cologne and the thundering of my heart. I released the breath I'd been holding, legs suddenly weak. 6 months I'd managed to avoid direct contact with him, and now this. Had he recognized me? No. If he had, his reaction would have been different. To him, I was just another servant. Forgettable. But he'd remembered my name. The small apartment I shared with my cousin Elena was a 30-minute bus ride from Castellano's luxury building. After swiping my keycard at the employee exit, I pulled my coat tight against the November chill and hurried to the bus stop, constantly glancing over my shoulder, a habit I couldn't shake since learning who Dominic really was. My neighborhood was a patchwork of dollar stores, laundromats, and family-owned restaurants with fading signs. Our building stood between a bodega and a cash-checking place, the stairwell perpetually smelling of cooking oil and cigarettes. Home, such as it was. "That you, Sophie?" Elena called as I locked the door behind me. She appeared from the kitchenette, wooden spoon in hand, her nurse's scrubs still on from her hospital shift. Her eyes immediately went to my stomach. "How's my little niece today? Active?" I smiled, the first genuine one of the day, like she's training for the Olympics. All kickboxing. Elena was the only person who knew my secret, both about the baby and its father. She'd been horrified when I'd taken the job at Castellano's penthouse. But we both knew the irony. It was the perfect hiding place. Who would look for his unknown, pregnant one-night stand working as a maid in his own home? "You look exhausted," she said, returning to the small pot of beans she was stirring. "Sit before you fall." I sank onto our second-hand couch, kicking off my sensible shoes. He spoke to me today. The stirring stopped. Elena appeared in the doorway, alarm widening her eyes. "Castellano? Directly?" I nodded, recounting the brief interaction. "Did he recognize you?" "I don't think so," I said, but uncertainty gnawed at me. It was dark that night, and I had my hair down, wore makeup. I looked different. Elena set the spoon down and came to sit beside me. "Sophie, maybe it's time to reconsider. My friend in Phoenix said you could stay with her until—" "And do what?" I interrupted. "Have this baby with no job, no insurance, in a city where I know no one? The pay at Castellanos is better than anything else I could get, and the insurance—" I trailed off, both of us knowing the reality. Without that job, I couldn't afford proper prenatal care. "It's dangerous," Elena insisted. "If he ever found out, he won't." I squeezed her hand. "I'm just another maid to him, invisible." But as I said it, I remembered the intensity in his gaze, that moment of scrutiny that had felt like being under a microscope. Had there been a flicker of recognition? Later, in the shower, I let the hot water sluice over my aching body, one hand cradling my growing belly. Through the thin walls, I could hear the television Elena had turned on. A news report about another business that had mysteriously burned down after refusing protection from unnamed sources. I knew what that meant now. Castellano's empire wasn't built on legitimate business alone. The charities and corporate holdings were facades for something darker. That night, as I lay in bed, I remembered how I'd met him, the charity gala where I'd been hired to serve drinks, wearing a black dress that matched all the other servers. He'd noticed me, really seen me, when I'd caught a tray of champagne flutes that another server had knocked over. Somehow, I'd managed to save every glass, a feat of balance that had drawn applause from nearby guests. "Impressive reflexes," he'd said, appearing at my elbow as I set the tray down at the service station. I'd looked up into those dark eyes and felt something electric pass between us. He hadn't been wearing a wedding ring. He'd introduced himself as Dominic Santos, a real estate developer. His smile had transformed his face, softening the hard edges. We'd talked for only minutes, but when my shift ended, he'd been waiting outside, one night. One beautiful, passionate night, where I'd felt seen for the first time in years. Then he'd disappeared, leaving only a hotel keycard and the memory of his touch. No number, no way to reach him. It had hurt, but I'd moved on. Until the pregnancy test 2 weeks later. It had taken me another month to discover who he really was. A photo in a business magazine at Elena's doctor's office. Dominic Castellano, not Santos, at the opening of a new luxury hotel. The article had mentioned his varied business interests and connections to old New York families. Euphemisms for what everyone knew but no one said aloud. By then, I'd already decided to keep the baby, my baby, mine alone. A sharp kick jolted me from my thoughts. "Shh, little one," I whispered, stroking my belly. "Everything's going to be fine, I promise." The lie tasted bitter on my tongue. The next morning dawned gray and threatening snow. I arrived at the penthouse early, as always, entering through the service elevator with 2 other maids. Mrs. Winters met us in the staff area, her clipboard already in hand. "Change of plans," she announced. "Mr. Castellano will be working from home today. Sophia, you'll handle the main living areas. Maria, the guest rooms need preparation for weekend visitors. Lucia, the kitchen and dining room." My stomach dropped. "Mrs. Winters, I thought I was scheduled for the West Wing today." Her lips thinned. "Mr. Castellano specifically requested you for the main areas." The other maids glanced at me with curiosity and something else. Concern, perhaps. Everyone knew it was better to remain invisible to the boss. I moved through my tasks with mechanical precision, dusting shelves lined with leather-bound books that looked untouched, polishing surfaces already gleaming. The penthouse was eerily quiet, except for the occasional murmur of voices from Castellano's closed office door, where he and several men had been meeting since morning. Just before noon, the door opened. 4 men in expensive suits filed out, nodding deferentially to Castellano, who stood in the doorway. I kept my head down, focusing intently on arranging fresh flowers in a crystal vase across the room. "Sophia." His voice carried across the space between us. I looked up, my hands stilling on the stems. "Yes, Mr. Castellano, bring coffee to my office. Black, no sugar. Right away, sir." As I prepared the coffee in the kitchen, I could feel my pulse racing. This was exactly what I'd been avoiding for months. Direct interaction, being alone with him. I checked my appearance in the reflection of a cabinet door, making sure my uniform hung loosely enough to conceal my condition. Balancing the coffee cup on a silver tray, I approached his office door and knocked softly. "Come in." Dominic sat behind a massive desk, his back to floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the city skyline. Snow had begun to fall, fat flakes swirling against the glass. The office was minimalist, all clean lines and muted colors, with a few strategic pieces of art that probably cost more than most people made in a lifetime. I set the coffee down carefully, keeping my eyes lowered. "Will there be anything else, sir? Look at me." The command, softly spoken, sent a shiver down my spine. Slowly, I raised my gaze to meet his. He studied me with that same intensity from yesterday, his expression unreadable. "I know we've met before," he said finally. My heart stuttered. "Sir?" "I never forget a face." He leaned forward slightly, "especially one as distinctive as yours." I kept my expression neutral, though panic clawed at my throat. "Perhaps you've seen me around the building, sir." A slight smile curved his lips, not reaching his eyes. "Perhaps." He picked up the coffee cup, took a sip, and nodded dismissively. "That will be all." I turned to leave, relief flooding through me, when disaster struck. As I reached the door, my foot caught on the edge of the plush carpet. I stumbled, throwing out a hand to catch myself against the wall. The sudden movement sent a sharp pain through my abdomen, and I gasped, my other hand instinctively going to my stomach. The sound of a chair scraping back. "Sophia?" I straightened quickly, but the damage was done. I turned to find him standing, his gaze fixed on where my hand still rested protectively. Understanding dawned in his eyes, followed by something colder. "You're pregnant." It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway, my voice barely audible. "Yes, sir." His jaw tightened. "Does Mrs. Winters know?" "No," I admitted. "I've been careful." He circled the desk slowly, approaching me with the measured steps of a predator. "How far along?" My mouth went dry. 5 months. Something flickered in his eyes, a calculation, perhaps. I watched as he counted back mentally, saw the exact moment when realization struck. His gaze snapped back to my face, really seeing me for the first time. "The charity gala," he said softly. "The Harrington Foundation. You caught a tray of champagne." The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. "I should get back to work, Mr. Castellano." I reached for the door handle, but his hand shot out, slamming against the wood panel, keeping it closed. He was close now. Too close. The scent of his cologne surrounding me, bringing back memories I'd fought to suppress. Who are you, really? His voice was dangerously quiet. My heart hammered against my ribs. Trapped between Dominic Castellano and the door, I felt the walls of my carefully constructed life beginning to crumble. I told you who I am, I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. Sofia Reyes, your maid. His eyes narrowed, searching my face for deception. That night, you told me your name was Sofia Alvarez. I use my mother's maiden name sometimes, I lied, the words bitter on my tongue, for privacy. He was silent for a long moment, his gaze dropping to my stomach, then back to my face. Something dangerous flickered in his eyes. Not anger exactly, but a cold calculation that frightened me more. And the father? He asked, his voice deceptively casual. I swallowed hard. Not in the picture. Is that so? He leaned closer, his arm still braced against the door. Interesting coincidence, then, that you'd end up working in my home. I needed a job with health insurance, I said, which was true enough. The agency placed me here. A knock at the door saved me from further questioning. Dominic's security chief's voice came through the wood. Boss, Vitelli's on the line. Says it's urgent. Dominic's jaw tightened, but he stepped back, allowing me space to breathe again. This conversation isn't finished, he said quietly. Then louder. Come in, Marco. I slipped past the bodyguard, feeling Dominic's eyes on me as I escaped. My hands trembled so badly I had to clasp them together as I made my way to the staff bathroom, locking myself inside. Leaning against the sink, I stared at my reflection in the mirror. Pale face, wide eyes filled with fear. He knew, or at least he suspected. The father of my child was not some nameless boyfriend, but him, Dominic Castellano, the man whose floors I polished and whose laundry I folded. What would he do with that knowledge? The baby kicked, as if sensing my distress, and I placed a gentle hand over the spot. It's okay, I whispered. We're okay. Another lie. By some miracle, I managed to avoid Dominic for the rest of the day. When my shift ended, I changed quickly in the staff locker room, pulling on my coat and hat before slipping out through the service entrance. The snow had stopped, leaving the city dusted in white that was already turning to gray slush along the curbs. I was halfway to the bus stop when a black SUV with tinted windows pulled up alongside me. My steps faltered as the rear window slid down, revealing Marco, Dominic's security chief. Ms. Reyes, he said, his face expressionless. Mr. Castellano would like to speak with you. It wasn't a request. I glanced around, weighing my options. Running was pointless. Where would I go? And causing a scene would only make things worse. I need to get home, I said. My cousin is expecting me. We'll inform her you'll be late. He opened the door. Please. The interior of the SUV was warm and smelled of leather. Marco took my address and phone number, presumably to contact Elena, then sat across from me, his presence imposing in the confined space. He didn't speak as the driver navigated through evening traffic, taking us not back to the penthouse, as I'd expected, but toward the outskirts of the city. After 20 minutes, we pulled up to a gated estate. Tall iron fences surrounded the property, with security cameras positioned at regular intervals. The gates swung open automatically, and we proceeded up a long driveway flanked by bare winter trees. The house, mansion really, was an imposing structure of stone and glass, set back from the road and illuminated by strategic lighting that cast dramatic shadows across its facade. 2 more security guards stood at attention near the entrance. This way, Marco said, leading me inside. The interior was a study in restrained luxury, clearly expensive but not ostentatious. No photographs adorned the walls, only carefully selected artwork. It felt more like a high-end hotel than a home. Marco led me to a sitting room where a fire crackled in a stone hearth. He'll be with you shortly, he said, then left, closing the door behind him. Alone, I perched on the edge of an armchair, too nervous to appreciate the comfort it offered. What did Dominic want? To threaten me? Pay me off? My hands unconsciously went to my stomach, protective. The door opened and Dominic entered, now dressed in a casual sweater and slacks that somehow looked as expensive as his suits. He'd loosened his hair from its styled perfection, and it fell slightly across his forehead, softening his appearance in a way that reminded me painfully of that night 8 months ago. Are you hungry? He asked, surprising me with the